The hottest recruiting team in the country, the Clemson Tigers, over in the ACC, where they're probably going to remain, of course, for the foreseeable future. Brian Smith, locked on the portal, and a long-time recruiting guy here joining me to discuss. The Tigers have surged up to the number 2 class in the country, Brian. 7 commits in 5 days. They're rolling it in. Is this a sign that they're going to stay, or are they going to be a flash in the pan and, hey, nice run in the middle of March?
I think they're going to be right where they are in the ACC towards the top. But overall, I still think this is going to be a top 10 class. They're refocused on what they're doing. They've got Matt Luke there as an offensive line coach. They're doing really well with offensive line recruiting, and it's just better balanced. They had several kids come in on a junior day visit. Again, I don't care who you are. 7 commits in 5 days, Spencer, that's not normal. There's no way they're not focused and they're not hitting on the kids that fit their blend of academics, faith, and family. And of course, they want big time players. So I went through the list. I mean, like Naeem Burrows can play for any school in the country. He might be the most explosive receiver in this class to get him early. And then, by the way, even though he might be a 10-5 guy or whatever, Connor Solomon's 10-4. So, like, good luck covering the receivers. They got Barclay, one of the best offensive linemen out of Florida already. This is a great group. So I didn't see it coming. I'm not going to lie, but I think they're here to stay.
This is a Clemson program that has flashed into the upper echelon of recruiting before, but is off a cycle, Brian, where they just barely missed out on a top 25 high school recruiting class. And for some schools, that isn't as important of a metric as it perhaps used to be, because well, you can always backfill with the portal and, bring in 10, 12 kids. But at Clemson, they brought in 3 transfers this cycle, which is a lot for Clemson.
Look out.
Look out, Deion Sanders. Dabo Swinney's coming for your philosophy, or not. But for Clemson, they are still building the overwhelming majority. For the big-time schools, it's still a majority of your roster is built through your high school recruiting classes. But for Clemson, it's even more important. So do you think that that's at play here at all, that they sense, hey, if we want to have a roster, this year, their roster is probably the best in the ACC. They return a lot of production. They're the reigning champs, of course. But do you think that they have that kind of urgency about them where they realize, what, we are going to add a couple kids from the portal, but we're never going to bring in 10 to 12 kids. It's going to be 3 to 5. So we've got to go heavy into high school recruiting and land top 5, 10 classes year in, year out?
I think they realize they got to up their game some. Now, the key for them isn't who they sign, it's who they keep. If you look at retention, I don't know if anybody's even close to them, Spencer, as far as the programs that we consider to be title contenders. Who's second place to them? I couldn't answer that. That's the difference in why they can be like number 15 compared to like Miami will have a top 10 class, but they lose a lot of kids. It's not who you sign, it's who you keep. So with their ability to keep everybody in the fold for the most part, they're doing pretty good. So now that you up the ante a little bit with more talent, now it gets a little more scary, because not only are you replacing a good player each year at a spot, you're replacing him with the way they're recruiting with an even better player. So I'm not saying that Blondie's walking back through the door to be behind Cinder, but they're still going to be a lot better than they have been the last few years. And it's not just a circumstance they're going to be a flash in the pan. I think Clemson's going to make a little bit of a comeback here.
For those watching on YouTube, you can tell I wasn't listening to Brian's answer, and I was trying to think of who else is on the Clemson level of talent retention in the country. It's hard, because even if you go to big-time programs, Georgia, Carson Beck is now at Miami. Alabama, Caleb Downs went to Ohio State. Now, those are just single guys, right? It's not really important, but they're really important guys. And I mean, one guy can in fact be a massive difference maker, even if it's not a quarterback. You think about, a guy who Clemson lost to the portal last year, Andrew Makuba, was huge for Texas. Huge. And I mean, if he flips sides of the ball, Texas still probably wins, but I think Clemson would have rather kept him. But they tend to keep a lot of those guys. To your point, Oregon does pop into my head here, Brian, not just because I'm an Oregon guy, but since Dan Lanning has been hired, he flaunts this very often, and I think justifiably so. The Ducks have not lost a starting player to the transfer portal. They have lost guys. They have lost some pretty highly touted recruits. They have lost guys who have gone on to succeed elsewhere. But from the prior season, they have not had a starter transfer out who, was playing, top of the depth chart, essentially. So that's one team that comes to mind. I think there are others. Frankly, Ohio State pops into my head as well.
This last year, they retained real well with
Yeah,
bank account.
it was all about player retention. And I think that, Michigan, another program where you don't really see mass, I don't know what the plural of exodus is. Exodi? I don't even know.
Mass exits.
Yeah, there you go. Just shorten the whole word. You don't see mass departures from Michigan or Ohio State either. And Clemson being in that realm, if they recruit at a top 5-10 level, Brian, I think they can push themselves back into that national championship picture within the next 2 to 3 years.
The only thing they still got to do, and you already touched on this, Spencer, they don't have to take a ton of guys from the portal. But when they go get somebody out of it, like you're going to lose a guy early to the draft or something, and there's going to be a hole somewhere where you just can't replace it, a pass rusher, an elite receiver, whatever it ends up being. Maybe after this season, Kate Klubnik's going to leave. This is where it gets really interesting. Dabo does not like, especially at quarterback, he wants his guy. What if he doesn't have a guy that's ready? And you know what I mean by not good enough to start, but like 8-4 at Clemson is frowned upon. And I'm being very kind. What if that's a situation at the end of the season and we start hearing rumblings about them with the portal, because high school quarterback recruiting is a crapshoot. About 60% of quarterbacks now transfer. It's crazy. What would
is it 60%, 60% sign?
Correct.
That is crazy.
Yeah.
That's oh my gosh, over half? Really?
Half has always been about the norm because there's only one guy that starts, but it's even 60% at the upper levels. It's insane. So would Dabo try to tap into that? I don't know. It's just something to think about, because even a program like Clemson, you're still going to have a hole somewhere once in a while. And if everything else lines up, you can't miss a quarterback. I don't care what program. It doesn't work. So there's just that little piece. But with the high school recruiting ramping up, they'll have to do less of that. That's the key. You're always going to have a hole. I get it. But if the recruiting continues like this, you'll have fewer concerns.
I want to go back to the 26 class for a moment, because right now the top 3 classes, according to 24/7 Sports, and it varies slightly but not significantly when you look at different recruiting services. USC is number 1. Clemson is now number 2. They have leapfrogged past Oregon. The Ducks are number 3. In the last couple cycles, Brian, only one of those teams has pulled in a top 5 class, and that's Oregon. Between USC, who flashed up around this time in the calendar a season ago for the 2025 class, and then came down a bit, still pulled in a top 20 class. I think it was 17th in the 2025 cycle. Between Clemson and USC, which recruiting school do you feel like has more staying power for this 2026 class?
Southern Cal. They hired Chad Bowden for a reason. I was told he got $1.6 million for a reason.
To be the GM. He came over from Notre Dame, right?
Correct. And after seeing Samote Karaanga this past weekend, among others, and he's their 5-star-ish edge that they just signed. I like guys that are 6'5", 255 with no body fat. Just throwing that out there. It's
hot take.
Yeah. They are trending in the right direction. They've refocused not just on taking one hit, wonders out of the portal. They got some busts. A certain one by the name of Bear Alexander last year in particular left them at the altar that killed them down the stretch. They've refocused and tried to recruit California more, which ironically, since you're a Ducks guy, there's going to be a lot more battles with USC and Oregon over the next 6-8 months, because USC was horrible at recruiting their backyard. Terrible. Heard some bad stories about that. Well, that's been changed. And it's not hard to recruit to SC. I mean, that city is massive with a lot of talent. Trinity League alone, there's 10 kids a year that can play at SC. So I'll go with them. But Clemson, again, they do it a little different. They take fewer risks. So when you compare them, and then Oregon, that's the hardest school, as I've told you a million times, to figure out. You don't know where their kids are coming from. They're wild. It's just fun to cover the Oregon Ducks. That I can agree with anybody.
Fact check true. I will agree with that particular sentiment, and that is how we wrap today's show. Appreciate everyone listening. I will see you next time, and until then, hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.